This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
It's Wednesday, February 5th, 2014, and this is Tech News Today. Tech News Today is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used iPhone, iPad, and other Apple products are worth at Gazelle.com. And by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TNT2. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgin.
I'm Sarah Lane.
I'm Tanya Hall.
And I'm Jason Howell.
Tech News Today explores the top tech news in 30 minutes or less, usually. Not yesterday.
I like that new addition.
Longtime Google veteran Susan Wojcicki will head the company's YouTube unit, according to a scoop in The Information. Wojcicki is currently Senior Vice President of Advertising and was Google's employee number 16 at Google. In fact, Google was launched in her garage in 1998. She's also the sister of Anne Wojcicki, founder and CEO of 23andMe, and the wife of Google co-founder Sergey Brin. Joining us to talk about the story is Jessica Lessin, founder and editor-in-chief of The Information. That's theinformation.com. Jessica broke the story along with senior reporter Amir Afradi. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so what is you reporting today exactly that's happening? Is this a done deal, or is she a leading contender? What's the state of this new appointment?
So Susan will be taking over YouTube, and we think and reported last night that some people inside the company have been notified about this already. I'm not sure the status of any announcement on that front, but the teams have been notified about the switch, including her old team, which was sort of overseeing all the Google's ad products, so search ads, display ads, and we expect this to be in place pretty soon.
Why do you think Google would put their top ad person in charge of YouTube?
It's a great question. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons going on, and with Google and Larry Page shuffling people around, you always have to look at that bigger picture too. But I mean, first and foremost, Susan, knows how to build and scale ad products. She did that with search, and she did that with display. And, YouTube has come a long way in monetizing the site. I mean, back in the day, it was when Google bought it, it was a big question whether it could make money. And, it certainly has taken in a lot of revenue, but it's still an area of a lot of focus and challenge. YouTube and the content on YouTube is not the fancy kind of professional.
So it looks like we're having some Skype issues. So we'll try to bring her back in just a second, but I think this is a pretty interesting change, especially since Salar Kamangar, who's been running the joint for a couple of years, he was actually employee number 9 or something like that. He was an employee even before Susan was, and he's kind of being not pushed aside, I guess. I mean, he'll get a choice assignment somewhere, but it's an interesting move, and I don't think anybody really expected her in particular to be taking over YouTube.
But ad veteran, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I feel like YouTube, there's certainly ads all over YouTube, but I don't like the experience most of the time. We've gotten to the point now where sometimes you can choose the ad that you want, or you can say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and watch this ad, or no, I'd prefer that one instead. And YouTube is able to pull that information and make more intelligent decisions about who advertisers should buy into in the future. Well, but it's still a messy experience.
Well, we've got Jessica back. Welcome back. There you are. Great. So it seems to me that what YouTube really needs more than for Google to make a lot more ad revenue is for channel partners and content creators to be able to make more money. There's a lot of grumbling on YouTube that it's just so hard to make money.
There's this virtuous circle. So to get the great content and to get content creators to put content on YouTube and to put it there first, they have to be able to make money from doing that. And YouTube's answer to that is sharing ad revenue. So you need the ad revenue to rise to get the content, and you need the content for the advertisers to want to be there. And that's the dilemma, and I think that's probably the dynamic that Susan will be focused on, and that the team there has been focused on.
Well, and she makes a logical decision. That's a logical decision because, you know, so much of the revenue that they're bringing in is through advertising, whether we like it or not. It's 89%, I think, of total revenue for Google.
Absolutely. And, you know, and increasingly, I mean, search is still this stalwart for Google, but it's got to get into these new areas. And it has, and display has become a big business for the company. But video and display, you know, it's still an area where we're forecasting a lot of growth in the overall ad market. And so YouTube's got to be able to compete. And it's doing that actually when there's more video inventory than ever, which puts pressure on prices. So Facebook is rolling out a new video ad product. You're seeing that across the industry. And that's going to flood the market with inventory, which is going to put pressure on prices. So that's the dynamic that YouTube has to grapple with. And it's a tough one. And it's happening as we sort of see this bigger change in the video and TV business. And I think you're going to have lots of competition and lots of players. And so it's an enticing challenge, I guess, too.
Yeah, I mean, advertising is a tricky business because you can never predict exactly how much the ads you're going to be able to sell ads for. Typically, sites fall back on harassing the users even more. In the case of video, the pre-roll video just seemed to be getting longer and longer, and people are getting pretty annoyed with it. I'm always curious with Google, what are the costs of serving up some of these things, especially with YouTube? I mean, YouTube generated, I believe, about $5.6 billion in ad revenue last year. But how much does it cost Google to serve up so many videos? I mean, this is super high bandwidth stuff. I believe that, you know, YouTube alone is responsible for an enormous two-digit percentage of all the internet traffic in the world. That's got to be expensive.
Absolutely. And I think if you look at the years right after Google bought YouTube, so 2006, 2007, they were kind of crushed by that problem. And that was the period of having to scale and get the costs down of delivering the product. That's Google's expertise today. I mean, it's better than probably anyone else at that in the world just because of the scope of its content network. So, and its engineering prowess. So I think that the costs are still sizable, but YouTube has been able to negotiate with providers and lay their own networks in some cases to be able to do that fairly efficiently. Now the question, I think, is, you know, what sort of business can you build on top of that?
Do you think that YouTube has any real competitors, either in terms of users, in terms of content creators, or especially in terms of video advertising out there? I mean, it's pretty much YouTube's, you know, they're pretty dominant in this space, aren't they? Is anybody coming up to sort of challenge their lead?
There's a lot. Online video is very competitive. I mean, I think they clearly have the pole position in user-generated content, but you know, that's only a part of the market, and it's not necessarily a very monetizable part. So I do think we have to watch what happens with Facebook and their push on video that many have written about in the past few months. I think that, you know, I noticed recently some pretty large stat about a gaming network called Twitch, which is just growing up, that's consuming huge amounts of traffic. And so, you know, that's another thing, sort of live video game competitions that is popping up. You know, I think you can't rule out any player like a Hulu. Everyone's trying to sort of monetize what.
Okay, it looks like we're losing the connection, and we thank Jessica Lessin for sharing her scoop with us. It was an awesome scoop. You can find her at theinformation.com. It's an awesome website. It's pretty new, and they're getting a lot of exclusives. So this is something you're really going to want to watch. And she mentioned Twitch. That's also a great name for a computer hardware show. Coming to you at the Twit Network.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Well, in a second, we're going to hear about Sony's radical new move. But first, I want to tell you about Gazelle. Gazelle is an awesome site that will buy your old gadgets and give you real cash for them. And it's a fantastic service. If you're thinking about getting the new iPad, which I recently bought and I recommend it highly, or the new iPhone, which I didn't buy, but I also recommend it for people who like iPhones, always go for the biggest and newest thing, and you can partially fund this upgrade by Gazelle. You don't have to wait 2 years for the carrier to give you permission to upgrade. You can upgrade on your own, and you can fund it with your old device, and you should do it as soon as possible, always, because devices always lose value. In other words, they're worth more now than they're ever going to be. So just go to gazelle.com. That's GAZELLE.com. Find your item. You just enter in the device that you'd like to sell them, and they'll tell you how much they'll pay you for it. And I think you're always going to be surprised by how much they'll pay. They really pay well for used gadgets. Sometimes they even buy broken gadgets. They'll fix them. They'll find a new home for them, but they'll pay you real money for even broken devices. You can get a risk-free offer for your gadgets, and what I mean by that is that when you put in the gadget and get your price, that's locked in for 30 days. That means that you can procrastinate, like I like to do, and just wait, and then when you send it in, you'll still honor that price because they told you that price and it's locked in for 30 days. You'll get paid fast by check, PayPal, or even with an Amazon gift card. And if you go with the Amazon gift card option, they'll give you 5% more money for your device. So that's always an excellent option because you know you're probably going to be buying stuff on Amazon. Payment is risk-free, and they'll even wipe the data. So if you leave some sensitive information on there, even if you wipe it yourself, it's a good idea for you to erase the stuff that's on there. But if you're not an expert at erasing data on a device, you can just send it in and they'll wipe it for you in a very professional and thorough way so that your data never gets in the wrong hands. Gazelle has more than 700,000 very happy customers, and they've paid more than $100 million. That's why they're so happy. It's free shipping, and most items qualify for a free box. So find out what your iPhone is worth. Take a minute and go to gazelle.com to find out. Do it now because your phone may lose value the longer you wait. Well, Sony, what's happening with Sony?
The Nikkei Asian Review is reporting today that Sony's in talks to sell its entire PC operations arm to Japan Industrial Partners. That's an investment fund. And then shift its hardware focus simply to smartphones, which is sort of the way of the future as far as Sony's concerned. So the plan would work as follows. The fund would establish a new company. Sony would sell the entire PC business to that newly created company. The sale price is estimated between 40 and 50 billion yen. That works out to just somewhere under 400 million to 500 million in US dollars. The new company would continue to make and sell PCs under the Vaio brand, which has been around since 1996. Sony would take a small stake in that firm and then withdraw operations from most countries and regions. They would still have, they would remain in a few. Well, Vaio, again, a little long in the tooth, but it's a respected, known, okay, some of you might say not as respected as it used to be, but it's a brand, it's an arm of Sony that people have known for quite a while. However, PC shipments peaked at 8.7 million units at one point, now projected to fall down to 5.8 million units. So Sony's not the only company that's trying to spin off the old way of doing the whole PC business and shift to smartphones, but what do we all think? I mean, is this the right move for Sony?
I think it is, personally, because I always felt that they never really got, it was never a good fit between Sony and the PC business. PCs really ought to be more open. They have to compete on price. Sony never figured out how to make affordable devices. They've come out with all kinds of really great devices. Some of their tablets, I wanted them really badly. Some of their laptops, I've owned Sony Vaios, big laptops. And I've always been dissatisfied with the price, and I've always been dissatisfied with the fact that they layer so much bloatware on top of it, and they try to create this controlled Sony ecosystem that's very Sony-centric. And that's really not the spirit of the PC. Even for companies to do that on a lightweight kind of way, Sony always had their own drivers, their own everything, and it was really annoying to spend so much money and then have to fight and struggle and wrestle with all of this crapware that they put on there.
The hardware business for Sony is an odd one, too. Their TV arm has had issues. Digital camera operations have had issues. Even though those are two areas that Sony sort of has that legacy stake in, you still think of Sony, oh, yeah, they make electronics, right? To say, hey, you know, we're going to have to switch hardware kind of to the smartphone way of doing things is still a pretty big gamble.
Yeah, and Sony has always been a kind of a weird company. They've had an Apple kind of attitude about things, very focused on design, industrial design. They've come out with some really beautiful products over the years, and they've tried to, again, integrate the software with the hardware to the greatest extent possible. But they've always had this weird structure, like kind of like Microsoft, where they have warring divisions, where they actually, you know, one division would be making a tablet, and then a completely different division would be making another tablet, and then it would be this weird, like, you know, lack of coordination between the divisions. decisions. So it's just a strange company, and I think it's probably a good thing that they're getting out of the PC business.
They are going to see some losses, at least the offset disposal losses, which will be a net loss for Sony for the first time in 2 years. That'll be the year ending March 31st. Reversal from a once projected 30 billion yen in profit. So it's sort of doubling down on the future, but having to take a hit in the short term.
Yeah, and they need more help than just jettisoning their PC business. They need to restructure the company in some fundamental way. My understanding is they make most of their money from insurance. They actually sell insurance, which is where a lot of their profits come from, which is totally bizarre to me. And it's a relatively recent business for them. There were also rumors coming out of another Japanese broadcasting organization, NHK, that said that they were talking about a possible joint venture with Lenovo. Once again, Lenovo is just on a tear with everything. So we really don't know what's going to come out of all of this. There's a lot of talking, but clearly Sony has to do something with their PC business. I think they're absolutely right. They got to do something with that business because they're just losing money. And, you know, they're not Microsoft. They can't lose money forever.
That's a really good point.
So what's happening with Google?
Okay, so obviously Google was in the news with our first story that was obviously pretty big with YouTube. But another piece of news, that Google is actually in the news this morning because of the European antitrust problems. They actually may be over. The company agreed to change search results to avoid a possible $5 billion fine. Google is willing to display links to 3 competitors next to their links of their own services that they're promoting. It would also label its own links. The European Commission will decide whether to make the change legally binding after talking to Google's competitors to see if it satisfies them. European regulators started investigating Google in 2010 after complaints that it favored its own website versus services that showed up in search results. Now, this is different than the U.S. agreement, and in fact, the European Commission refused Google's first offer. So this is actually a huge step. Again, it's not official, so it may not happen, but it's very similar to the U.S. agreement.
Yeah, I think something is clearly going to happen. I mean, one of the things that irks me about this whole story is the way the European Commission treats these kinds of things. They go to the competitors, they go to Google's competitors and essentially say, what do you want us to do to your competitor? And of course, they say, well, we want you to shut them down. We want you to force them, over-regulate them, dictate to them what their search results can be, and all kinds of remedies that are obviously impractical. And to its credit, the European Union is not jumping on these remedies for the most part. But even after this, Google came back with an offer that's pretty aggressive and pretty, it's hard for them to do, to essentially promise to display the results of their competitors directly and then label this. It changes the whole way that search appears to the users and so on. But they're going to now take this, the European Union is going to now take this back to the competitors and say, what do you think? Is this good enough? And of course, many of their competitors are already jumping out.
I mean, side by side, it's what do they want?
But what are they going to say? They're going to say, no, it's not enough. Every single one of their competitors, I guarantee you, are going to say, no, it's not enough.
There's only so many concessions, though. I mean, we've been talking about this for 3 years now. I mean, Google has said, okay, European Commission, how about this? And the Commission says, no, not good enough. They're threatening to fine them 10% of their entire revenue for 2012, which is in the billions of dollars. Yeah, Google has a lot of money, but that's not the sort of thing that they can handle. Yeah. So sure, figure out how to say, here's a Google solution, here's a competitor solution, same place. The warring companies that are jealous of Google's success in a variety of markets, I mean, there's only so much power that they have.
Sure.
They can't dictate this entire story.
Exactly. And to your point, I mean, give me a break. The Polish online auction site Allegro, the German online mapping service EuroCities is going to be placed side by side with Google Maps as co-equal almost in Google search results. I mean, is that fair? Is that an accurate representation of the relative heft of these links? And, ultimately, it's a very, very challenging thing for multiple reasons. One is that search algorithms are trade secrets. They are deep, dark secrets.
Right.
How Google actually arrives at its conclusions when you do a search is something that they really can't talk about. That's their whole bread and butter. And secondly, it's impossible to, no matter what Google says or what anyone in the industry says, it's impossible to have value-free search results. And by value-free, I mean every decision you make about this is more important than that is a value judgment. Are links and popularity more important than other factors? Is traffic more important? Is revenue important? What is the important aspects that determine the search results? And it's even more complicated because everything is personalized now. So you're drawing in the personal actions of individual users. So somebody's got to make those judgments. Should it be governments? Should it be Google? It's a tough problem.
It is a tough problem, and that's exactly why Google is really trying to settle this before they do get fined. To your point, Sarah, because they want this to work out. We've obviously settled here within the United States, but here's the thing: that this is where we've been dealing with this kind of issue a long time in business, long before Google, when you had cable companies that were monopolies. But they built it. They're the ones that invested in the infrastructure. They're the ones that invested in the talent, and yet it's a monopoly, so they have to be fair. I mean, that's where it becomes really sticky. But you're right. I mean, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. They've been very successful, but everybody's wanting to take advantage of that success. So.
Yeah, it's a tough issue because on the one hand, somebody has to keep companies honest. I mean, Google has just enormous power. But on the other, sometimes it seems like the European Union just sees Silicon Valley companies as just a place for additional revenue. France is about to tax Google an extra $1 billion. It emerged today. And I think Google's biggest EU fight is coming up, and that's going to be around its Android operating system and its quote-unquote monopoly and dominant position in the smartphone handset business. Again, Google has enormous power, and EU doesn't like it. Well, as part of Silicon Valley, speaking of power, as part of Silicon Valley's power and phone infrastructure was attacked last year. The attack was covered in the press last April, but an exclusive report in the Wall Street Journal today has pieced together a detailed timeline of the incident. And it's far worse than previously reported and a little scary once you see the details. The attack started after midnight on April 16th of last year. Some unknown number of people, possibly one, possibly two or three, broke into an underground vault south of San Jose and cut telephone cables. If you've ever driven into Silicon Valley from the south, you've driven right by this enormous power structure and telephone area. And then after these telephone cables were cut, snipers came out and positioned themselves in the ideal location to start shooting at the Metcalf Power Substation for 19 minutes. And they took out 17 transformers that relay power to Silicon Valley. This is Silicon Valley's main source of electricity that powers Google, Facebook, Twitter, Apple. All of these big sites have their main server infrastructure in Silicon Valley and derive power mostly from this power station. So a blackout was avoided only because officials rerouted power around the site and boosted electrical production from nearby power plants. Nobody was ever caught in this, and it sparked a huge conversation in two circles. One is in the cybersecurity circle in the tech community, also in the national security and anti-terrorism circles. They started looking at this as a possible terrorist attack, and it's quite a strange thing. The former energy regulator John Wellinghoff called it a terrorist attack, and U.S. Navy experts with the U.S. Navy SEALs came in and said this looked like a professional job. They said that this is the kind of thing the Navy SEALs might do, more or less, if they were to attack a foreign country and go after their power grid.
A couple things that terrify me about this. First of all, that this happened last April. And the Wall Street Journal is just now saying, hey, you want a detailed timeline of what happened? Because we've sort of put it together almost a year later. And some odd details about how this power plant was attacked. And there were little notes for the snipers because somebody had been there ahead of time saying this particular angle is going to take out, I don't know, the cool generator that's going to make the biggest impact.
Yeah, somebody put little piles of rocks saying shoot from here.
There were little cheat sheets.
Right.
So I guess my question is, how do we protect our power plant so this sort of thing never happens again?
It's really interesting because you see this overwhelming sort of infrastructure and bureaucracy around the Department of Homeland Security. But according to the Wall Street Journal, their position on power plant security is it's up to the power industry. It's not our deal. We're not here to protect against sniper attacks on electrical grids.
Well, and I'm a little bit about less government being involved, but this is something where this goes down, and it obviously takes down much more than just our electricity. It takes down all of our ways to communicate. So it's a little scary. And to your point, Sarah, I can't believe that I guess I can believe that we're just hearing about this, but that is the scary part because we don't have time to correct anything, to fix it.
I mean, this incident was known about. It's just the details of how pro and almost inside job like this all sounds now that it's like, well, hold on a second. I mean, is it just a matter of having some sort of a larger area that is patrolled by people who know what they're doing? I don't exactly know what the answer is. I also have driven past this particular energy area of South San Jose. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. You would think that it would be the sort of place that you wouldn't be able to get too close to, in a black mask holding a gun and get very far. But
right.
I guess this incidents like that have to happen in order for security to get better.
One of the interesting debates that's come out of this is the debate between where do we put our emphasis when we're trying to protect the infrastructure from attack from nefarious characters, terrorists, foreign governments, enemies, North Korea, etc. Kim.com, and there's a lot of emphasis on counter hacking, sort of protecting against cyber attack, which is a terrible phrase. And a lot of people are saying, hey, we shouldn't worry so much about hackers. We should worry more about physical infrastructure. And I completely disagree with that. And the reason for that is that shooting and sniping at power grids doesn't scale. Yeah, you can take out San Jose, but then you've got 500 other cities in the U.S. Whereas a cyber attack scales really nicely. You can do something at scale, theoretically, that could do a real number on the U.S. Infrastructure, on the military infrastructure, on the communications infrastructure, and so on. Cutting phone lines and shooting at power grids, it's fascinating they did that, and it's fascinating that it turns out to have been such a professional job. But I really don't think that we're in imminent threat of being sniped to death one power
that's a relief.
grid at a time. Yeah.
Good thing.
I know.
As long as people in the United States don't start getting guns, we'll be all right.
Sure.
So,
thank goodness for that. Hey, you know what's cool? 6 billion hours of video viewed every month on YouTube. We were talking about YouTube getting a new boss earlier in the show. However, YouTube has a fake eyeball problem. Google has announced a crackdown on what it calls fraudulent views on YouTube. Those are from channels who inflate their view counts. It's not unlike buying Twitter followers that are basically bunk, that sort of thing. There's a whole side business to this. YouTube says it's always audited videos in an effort to try to spot inflated count, stuff that goes up too quickly. But now the company is going to take it more seriously. According to software engineer Philip Pfeffenberger, it's a quirk of the system that YouTube's parent company is driving traffic to these third-party businesses. So what they're going to do is scan views for spam after they've occurred, but also will periodically validate the video's view count. And that should help remove fake views, as new evidence comes to light that maybe they're coming from somewhere else, or there's some sort of a crazy refresh issue from a variety of IPs that seems suspicious. So the approach shouldn't affect more than just a few, really a small portion of all the videos on YouTube, of which there are billions of them. Pfeffenberger says, we believe it's crucial to improving the accuracy of view counts and maintaining the trust of our fans and creators. That sounds fine and good, but clearly this is about advertising because, as we mentioned, that's YouTube's business. You got to advertise on YouTube videos. As a content creator, you get a cut of the pie. YouTube gets quite a bit of that, and YouTube's raking in a lot of dough because of that. And this is the problem that is not, it's not unique to YouTube. Fake Facebook likes, fake Twitter followers, fake view counts. My video got 1 million views. Well, there is something about that allows you to kind of sell yourself as something that you're not. It's like cooking the books.
Yeah, well,
same idea.
Here's the thing, though. I think the difference, the nuance between like Twitter or Facebook is, okay, let's YouTube. They not only pay people for their YouTube accounts that have lots of likes, but every time they get a like, right, or they get somebody that's paying attention or clicking on the video, they're getting paid for that. So there's that part of it, right, where they're actually benefiting from all these. But
if you can do fake views, you're just like printing money.
Yeah, I mean, it's YouTube, and so, but again, as an advertiser, do you really want to pay YouTube for that? So that puts them in kind of an ambiguous state. But I think that it's they're kind of in the middle. They're getting paid for, what's they're being hacked. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that's going to affect their revenue stream.
Yeah, I mean, this is advertiser-supported media, and in every advertiser-supported media, you have this problem. Back in the old magazine era, when that was one of the main forms of advertiser-supported content, you always had this thing called guaranteed paid circulation. You always knew that there was a fudge factor in the advertising things. Somebody would say, oh, we have a circulation of 1 million people. And everybody knew, the advertisers knew, the publications knew, everybody knew that, yeah, okay, it's probably, you're looking at 700,000 people. And 300,000 people are just, these are dentist office where nobody's reading it, or this is, people are lining the bottom of their parakeet cage or something like that with these magazines. So this is always going to be a problem. They have to deal with it, and it's great that they're dealing with it. And Google really should use all of their best resources to sort of tamp down on this issue. But, I mean, let's face it, it's an arms race. Every time they come up with a new way to quash fake views, they're going to come up with better ways to fake views.
Well, and not only that, but if you peel away that sort of built-in padding of, 100,000, give or take, advertiser, please give us money, once you can become... a number means a lot more. There are qualifying and quantifying factors, and the numbers that you see are a lot closer to the reality of numbers. Well, then you start disrupting the advertising model in a way that it doesn't necessarily help everybody too. I mean, I think that we want the numbers to be as accurate as possible, but it changes the industry to do that.
Absolutely. And this is all part of the larger effort, which we saw earlier in the show, for Google to figure out how to turn YouTube into something much bigger, where people are making much more money, where advertising is much more reliable and high dollar, essentially. They're boosting the value of advertising. And so they have to do this. It's a real business, and they're absolutely going to do it. Well, we're going to hear in a second about a really goofy event that happened back in 2001 involving Steve Jobs and Sony. But first I want to tell you about Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy for you to create your own professional website or online portfolio. You can make the most professional looking, professional functioning websites on the internet. Literally, you can be up there with the very, very best sites on the internet. Or you can make a personal site. You can do anything because it's very easy to use their free 2-week trial. And we'll give you 10% off if you go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TNT2 to his month for February. They have all kinds of new features, new designs, and even better support. So if you saw Squarespace a year ago or 6 months ago, you need to go back and check it out, because it's a whole new deal. It's a fantastic site with 20 new beautiful templates for you to start with, and all the style options you need to create a unique website for you or your business. And it's incredibly easy to use. If you've never built a website in your life, this site is super easy for you to use, with intuitive controls. You can go in there and choose one of their templates, which is a great start. It's a beautiful, elegant start. Just enter in your information, follow the simple instructions. And then you can use their intuitive tools to tweak and customize your site so that your site is unique in all the internet and still retains a beautiful design. Squarespace tech support is open 24/7, and it's a really top-notch tech support. It starts at $8 a month and includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. It's mobile ready, and this is super important, because if you've got a blog or a website that you need to maintain, you should have a constant presence on your site to maintain and respond to users, and to keep tabs on what's going on. You can use their Squarespace metric app that lets you check stats like page views, unique visitors, social media followers, and so on. For the blog app, you can go in and make text updates, drag and tap images, and you can monitor comments. And that's very important. I've been a blogger for many, many years, and monitoring comments is one of the best ways to boost engagement. If you can do it from a mobile device, you're way ahead of it, because you can do it from anywhere. So start a free 2-week trial today with no credit card required, and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TNT2. That's TNT2, and that'll get you 10% off the already very low price. But again, it's 2 weeks free at the beginning, so you should just check it out right away. And you also show your support of Tech News Today by using TNT2. We thank Squarespace for their support of this show, and we want you to remember that Squarespace is everything you need to create an exceptional website.
Well, we got an email from Milton, and this is piggybacking off of our discussion yesterday of the new head of Microsoft. He says, it's been reported that John Thompson, who's also on the board, was reluctant to become chairman of the board at Microsoft. I wonder if, as a part of his negotiations to become CEO, Satya Nadella was promised to also be named the chairman of Microsoft in some time, let's say a year or two, if he does well. Having both jobs would give Nadella a lot of leverage, a lot of independence from Gates and Ballmer, something that was a problem for many other CEO candidates. Well, I can't pretend to know what's going on. Wasn't a fly on the wall, but that's an interesting idea. If this was part of a couple years down the road, you'd sit in the big chair.
I don't think it's going to be 2 years. I mean, in 39 years, the company's had 2 CEOs. I don't think he's going to be ready to stop being CEO in 2 years unless he fails miserably, which I don't think this guy's going to fail. I think he's going to do very well.
No, Milton's saying he would be promoted to chairman as well.
Perhaps so to have both.
Perhaps not initially.
Right, okay.
But that maybe that's part of a contract that's like, hey, in a couple years, then you get to chairman, but let's just do this slowly.
It's possible, but I think it's a terrible idea. I generally think that companies that have a chairman who's also the CEO is just the wrong way to go. The whole purpose of the chair of the board is to essentially be the boss of the CEO. The CEO is supposed to report to the board, and the board is supposed to report to the owners, who are the stockholders. And that's the way it's supposed to get. When you have the situation that Microsoft has almost always had in the early years, where Bill Gates was the founder. He was the sort of the main face of the company. He was the CEO, and he was the chairman. Nobody could touch this guy, and he did whatever he wanted. We talked about this a lot yesterday, and many of Microsoft's problems were the result of just Bill Gates was basically a dictator. And so I don't think it's a good idea. It's possible, of course, and it's an interesting point. We appreciate that, Milton. I just don't think it's a good idea. But they don't ask me. So.
But that's the whole point of having a board, though, to your point, is that actually helps your direction of your company. It doesn't just protect the investors. It really is a sounding board. It's guidance, it's peers, it's networking, and you basically, as a CEO, report to the board. So
yeah, exactly. Well, the late Apple founder and CEO, Steve Jobs, loved Sony. In fact, his famous sort of turtleneck was loosely based on the Sony employee uniform, and he thought at some point that Apple employees should have uniforms. It didn't fly. The Apple employees rejected it completely. But he loved Sony so much that he tried to convince the company to make a Sony Vaio laptop that ran Mac OS. And this happened in 2001. A former president of Sony, Kunitake Ando, told a Japanese reporter yesterday that he met Jobs in Hawaii in 2001 while Sony executives were playing golf. At the end of the golf course, Jobs and his Apple entourage were standing there waiting for Sony with a Sony Vaio running Mac OS. They actually got it running to demonstrate how awesome it would be if Sony would be a Mac OEM, essentially. Sony turned them down because they believed their Windows-based Vaio line was about to take off and become awesome. And as we learned today, that didn't really happen. And I actually think that it would have been a really interesting development to have Sony building essentially Macs. Sony Macs. How weird is that? Well, that's our show. Watch today for Twitter's earnings. This is the first IPO since the company's, this is the first earnings report since the company's IPO. So it's going to be weird and nobody really knows what they're going to report.
Pandora and Yelp today as well.
That's right. So send your news tips to our email address at tnt@twit.tv or call 260-TNT-SHOW and leave a message for us. Also, upvote the stories you'd like to see us cover on our subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com and visit our Tech News Today Google Plus community. If you haven't already, subscribe to Tech News Today at twit.tv/TNT. We thank you so much, and we will see you tomorrow.